beyond.
The Artemis program is building on all of the work that happened that we saw 50 years ago when we planted a flag on the moon.
And NASA is still eyeing this Friday as its next launch window. In the meantime, crews will return to the launch pad to begin to fix some of those issues that we heard about. I'm Morgan Norwood from Kennedy Space Center, ABC News.
Morgan, thank you. So now the launch is delayed, but we've been waiting years for it.
Yeah, maybe it'll happen on Friday. Have a great day, everyone.
News in America this morning.
It's Tuesday, August 30th. You're the master of your own domain unless the FBI raids your domain. We start here. As a judge considers whether to appoint a special master to protect seized documents, the Justice Department reveals it's already looked through them.
This case is complicated by the fact that many of the documents that we're talking about are classified.
What it means for the Mar-a-Lago investigation. The storms didn't stop for a week, while Mississippi is just beginning to reckon with the damage.
Every half hour was a downpour to the level of not being able to see right in front of you.
Our team is there with families witnessing historic floods, and Ukraine says it wants its land back. Today's the day they try to go get it.
They do have a good chance because the population is on their side in these occupied areas.
After months of being pushed back by Russia, a dramatic counteroffensive is underway. From ABC News, this is Start Here. I'm Brad Milkey. In cases involving sensitive documents, there's this kind of goofy phrase for a really important job. It's called a special master. A special master has a simple job. It's not to prosecute anyone, it's not to defend, it's to be a neutral enforcer of a judge's orders. For example, a special master might be asked to look at all the documents in a case and decide who should have access to which ones. Are these documents protected by attorney-client privilege? Let the special master decide. Well, recently, lawyers for former President Trump have said the documents seized at Mar-a-Lago by the Justice Department should not be entrusted to the DOJ. Instead, prosecutors should have to go through a special master.
What the judge has done is said, I preliminarily have an intent to appoint a special master, but I haven't heard from the government yet.
Well, yesterday, the DOJ announced, we've already combed through these documents and we've made some of these distinctions ourselves, just maybe not for the stuff the Trump team was arguing over. Let's go to ABC's Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas, because Pierre, just so I'm getting this right, President Trump's team said some of these documents should be covered by executive privilege, right, where no one gets to see it except who the president wants. DOJ comes back yesterday and said, we've been checking for stuff, but stuff between you and your lawyer, not any of this executive privilege stuff. What is happening here?
Well, at the end of the day, the Trump attorneys are saying that they believe there could be some documents in the stash that the FBI agents took from Mar-a-Lago that may involve privilege. And they're basically saying they don't trust the Justice Department and the FBI to handle this situation properly. DOJ, for its part, is now saying that they pretty much completed the process, that they've identified what may be attorney-client privilege issues, and they're willing to give that information over under the court's supervision, obviously. Now, I think the key here is going to be, what does the judge do? Does the judge look at what DOJ's done and feel like that it's enough? Or the judge could say, in the interest of making the president or others feel more comfortable, we're going to have someone go through it and look through these materials again as a neutral observer overseen by the court to make some suggestions and recommendations. However, this case is complicated by the fact that many of the documents that we're talking about are classified. So that raises a whole nother potentially complicating issue. So this is going to be, while wonky, still quite interesting.
Well, and the first thing that went through my mind, Pierre, was, is it legal for the DOJ to just start sifting through all these documents that they recovered before we've even decided if there's going to be a special master? Then somebody reminded me the Trump legal team actually didn't file this request for like 2 weeks after the search. So is the judge just going to be like, too bad, so sad, you waited too long?
You know, it's going to be interesting because the judge, may ask the very question you just posed. Why did it take you 2 weeks to come to me to look for this remedy? That's question number one. Also, it's going to be interesting to see how the Justice Department, responds to some of the claims in the document filed to the court by the Trump attorneys. So, again, there's a hearing scheduled on this coming Thursday, and I believe that's the first time that we'll see Department of Justice attorneys and attorneys for President Trump in the same courtroom in connection with this matter.
Zooming out a little bit, Pierre, because you've been examining this affidavit that was filed on Friday. You've been examining it for the last several days, and you've said that this is, even though so much is blacked out, there's a lot to this case that still has yet to be fleshed out. In your mind, what are the most important issues here that you're tracking so far?
I think the thing that struck me the most about the heavily redacted affidavit is it made it very clear, stone cold clear, this is a very active and ongoing investigation. What do I mean by that? For example, it makes clear that the case has been built so far on, quote, a significant number of civilian witnesses. And they go out of their way to say that they have fears that these witnesses could be intimidated or retaliated against. So that tells you that they're getting cooperation for witnesses, they're expecting more, they want more, and they're very concerned about the potential that they could somehow be obstructed in participating in this investigation.
That's interesting, Pierre, because I feel like we keep hearing about classified documents and national security. You don't want spies burned, but it sounds like part of the issue is just witness intimidation is clearly an issue as well.
Very much so. And we saw something that's rare, Brad. The document also pointed out that the very FBI agents who went down there for the raid, whose names, some of their names became public through some of the court filings, that they have expressly and explicitly faced threats. That's very unusual for agents working the case to be subject to threats in a case like this. So there's that. The other issue is that they're pointing out that not only have they identified potential crimes that have been committed, and they're looking at specific people who may have committed those crimes. There was a line that sort of literally jumped off the page from one of the documents that I read, and it basically said that the FBI has not yet identified all the criminal confederates that they may be looking for. So that, again, additional people that may become targets, also the notion that they're not quite clear that they have everything just yet.
Fascinating moments here. All right. Pierre Thomas, covering justice, tracking it all. Thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Next up on Start Here, these residents already didn't trust the water, and then the storms began rolling in. We go to Mississippi after the break.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers.
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Bring them on.
If only there was a place in the morning to start my day. With a smile, somewhere to help me get in the know. A place as spectacular as, well, me.
I think we might know a place, right, guys?
Bring your friends.
Oh, wait, there is.
Good morning, America.
GMA, 7A, every day. Boom, boom, boom.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Robin. Good morning, America. How are you?
Boom. Now that's how you start your day, people.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
How cute.
Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
It was an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new Hunt wherever you get your podcasts.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions. Straightforward reporting. No spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
ABC News, America's #1 news source.
You know how you hear the phrase 1,000-year storm? Like, according to data on hand, an event like this should only happen once every 1,000 years. Well, over the last month, the U.S. has experienced 5 different 1,000-year storms.
Everybody that's still here is on second floors generally.
The building is literally cracking right now.
From Missouri to Illinois to Texas, many communities were plunged underwater in a matter of hours. Well, it was more than a week ago that big thunderstorms also started moving into Mississippi.
The rescue's underway in Jackson, Mississippi, the terrifying flooding emergency.
When the water comes down that fast and that quick, it has nowhere to go.
For days, the rain just didn't seem to stop. What we've seen since are some of the most catastrophic flood levels ever seen in this already strapped community. ABC's Trevor Ault is on the ground in Jackson, Mississippi. Trevor, how bad has it gotten there?
Well, Brad, it's kind of hard to overstate, number one, how bad the rainfall was, and then how bad the flooding was, and also just the longevity of the flooding here. I mean, we're talking about a weather event that's now created ripple effects that last easily a week into the future, especially when you consider, Brad, that all of these rainstorms in Mississippi were already devastating rainstorms in Texas before they even got here last week. But what I can tell you is here in Jackson, Mississippi, we watched this rainfall come in, record levels of rain last week, dumping 5 inches in 24 hours.
This frontal system is just not moving anywhere, so it is going to continue to inundate us with rain.
That naturally is going to create flash flooding. So we've got streets all over the city, all over Mississippi, that are just underwater.
Rescuers out in full force just east of Jackson in Brandon, Mississippi tonight, rescuing many seniors from a flooded assisted living facility.
We're seeing assisted living facilities where they have to pull out 31 senior citizens in waist-deep water.
Look at it. Oh my God, it's getting, oh my God.
There's daycares with 100 kids that had to be evacuated. All of this is playing out across the city.
We got trees growing up in the ditch, couches, chairs, tables, everything down in that ditch, and the water can't go nowhere.
And I gotta tell you, being in this rain, I mean, everyone's been in a rainstorm, but Brad, it really felt like there was constant rainfall, but also every half hour was a downpour to the level of not being able to see right in front of you. And it just kept happening and kept happening and kept happening. That was the first wave. So we had several days of rainfall here in Jackson, Mississippi. That caused its own level of flooding. There was then basically the aftermath of those storms, which means all that rainfall that comes down, it has to go somewhere.
This is the Barnett Reservoir. It's filled to the brim from last week's extreme rainfall, and officials are trying to do a controlled release of it.
Here in Jackson, a lot of it goes into the Barnett Reservoir, which is this gigantic, if you looked at it, you would think it was a lake. That's where all of this rainfall gathers, and then they filter it down into the Pearl River. When they have so much of it that the Barnett Reservoir is about to overflow, they have no choice but to send it into the river, even though it was going to send the river into flood stage. And so that is what they started to do over the weekend.
We're letting water out now faster than coming in order to try to hold some of the water in 2 days, 3 days when the peak gets here.
We watched the Pearl River climb, knowing that flood stage is at 28 feet for the crest.
So right now we're looking at releasing 45,000 cubic feet per second. That'll push the river in Jackson at Highway 80 to 34 feet.
This thing climbed and climbed and climbed up above 35 feet yesterday before it finally crested. And we knew as this was going on that this was going to flood some neighborhoods because they were releasing all of the water down the river and thus into the communities too. And people were evacuating all through the weekend.
Oh, just to keep the reservoir from not completely tipping over, becoming a disaster zone in itself.
Well, yeah, the alternative is they let it overflow, and then it goes into catastrophic flooding, even worse than we had it.
Well, and like, I'll leave it up to our meteorology team to talk about why we're seeing so many storms back to back to back. But is there a sense of why the flooding is seemingly even worse than ever before?
I mean, as far as I can tell, it's because we keep having these historical level rain events. And also what we're hearing, Brad, is what's making it worse for floods specifically is that it's coming on the heels of drought. And so you have all of these areas where the land is incredibly dry, and then you get record levels of rainfall. It makes the land much less stable immediately, and you get a lot of more movement in terms of flooding. You get a lot of more movement in terms of landslides. And so you have really weather events that are polar opposite of each other, feeding into each other, and it's made for really a devastating summer in a lot of parts of the country.
It is no secret to any of us that we have a very fragile water treatment facility.
And I got to mention, Brad, also, in terms of problems, there's probably a lot of people in Jackson that don't even make flooding their top priority because all this played out as that same Barnett Reservoir is the location where they treat a lot of their water that goes out for people to drink. And Jackson has been plagued with water treatment problems to the point that weeks before this flooding even got here, they issued a boil water advisory, and you can't even safely drink from the tap right now. So you got people that were packing up everything they had, trying to get out of their homes, and also had to make sure that they had bottles of water with them because they couldn't even trust the water coming from their own pipes as the water outside was coming up to their front door.
Yeah, you show up somewhere thinking like, now I'm safe, but you can't even necessarily trust the water you're going to have in that place. Bring some water along with you. All right. Trevor Ault, there in Jackson. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Brad.
Up to this point, the invasion of Ukraine had had three distinct acts. Act 1, Russia assaults nearly the entire country all at once. Act 2, to Russia's surprise, Ukraine bullies Russia's forces out of Kiev and away from some of its biggest cities, which was followed by Act 3, a long, violent series of battles in which Russia has slowly, brutally taken more land, mile by bloody mile. But overnight, there might be another chapter unfolding here. ABC's Britt Klena is in Dnipro, Ukraine right now. Britt, can you just fill us in on what's been happening the last 24 hours?
Right. So this is interesting because we've kind of known there has been a counteroffensive in the works for some months, but now obviously it's coming into fruition.
The Russians have probably lost 3,000 or 4,000 armored vehicles in Ukraine, which is a lot.
What you're seeing with these very carefully planned attacks that are having a significant impact on Russia's military capability.
Ukraine's military is claiming to have broken through Russia's kind of first line of defense in the occupied Kherson region. So that's the region we're watching extremely closely here. This push appears to be kind of part of a long-awaited counteroffensive launched by Kyiv in an attempt to retake the country south, retake that land that has been taken from them.
We are not afraid of the Russian Federation.
And we've seen a defiant President Zelensky coming out and telling the Ukrainian people very boldly, we are taking it all back. And he's made that very clear that that is the intention. So we will likely see more attacks in the south in the coming weeks and months.
Does this stand a chance, though, Britt? Like, if just to the layperson on the other side of the world, you wonder if Ukraine was capable of repelling Russia's military like this, wouldn't they have done it already? I mean, is there a sense that Ukraine could just take their land back in these areas?
Right. Well, look, from the Ukrainian side, they do have a good chance because the population is on their side in these occupied areas. Not so much the areas that were taken, more further years back, in 2014, but certainly in the regions that have been taken in the last few months, there is a sense that the people, that the residents there are on their side, that they are suffering under occupation.
We all believe in our victory, and we really need Europe to still support us and to stand with us till.
And the Russians will be facing kind of Afghan-like fights as well. So yes, there is a chance for them to kind of have this push. It's not clear, as you know, winter will be coming in by November, by December. There's a sense that there will be a freeze in this war, that there really needs to be a push, that they need to make some headway before that time.
Oh, that's interesting. That sort of like whoever gets to November or December with whatever land you got, that's the land you're probably going to have for the next several months. Britt, I'm also thinking there's no longer really a concern about Russia using nuclear weapons over all this, but there have been concerns about nuclear fallout as a byproduct of this war. Just in the last several days, we've seen more and more shelling at that Zaporizhia power plant. It got so bad and so dangerous, people thought there would be a nuclear disaster. They had to take the plant offline. You spent more time there than most reporters on Earth. What are you seeing at Zaporizhia now?
Brad, I have spent days and days and days at the Zaporizhia evacuation center, and you just see columns of cars rolling in from the occupied areas, including around the Zaporizhia nuclear plant, which is under threat, as you say. It is just heartbreaking speaking to these people. They are so exhausted. What are you telling your kids about what you guys are doing and the fact that you had to leave home?
It's the Russians who forced us out, fighting back tears, saying she now has to start from scratch.
Today I spoke to a family who had been waiting at the checkpoint. Imagine this. You've got young kids, you're waiting at a checkpoint for 5 days. You know, you're short on water and food, and your kids are crying and they haven't slept, and it is just exhausting for them. They are shell-shocked, they're exhausted, they're tired. So on top of the nuclear threat, they have to deal with this, you know, uprooting their lives, taking everything they have with them. And they describe life under occupation, and it sounds hellish. You know, they say that the kids, that the Russians bully their kids, that they are threatened, that they're scared of them. It really does sound, by the way that these people describe, that life under occupation near that plant is kind of horrific. So one of the added aspects to this, of course, is the nuclear plant under threat.
But any potential damage to the plant leading to a possible nuclear incident would have catastrophic consequences, not only for the immediate vicinity, but for the region and beyond.
In recent days, we've seen the safety of the plant also compromised, and that's raised fears around this region.
If these reactors are ruptured and radiation spreads, I don't think there's enough iodine in the world to protect people.
What we've seen now, we went to a medical center earlier today, is an uptick in people getting their hands on iodine pills. So I went to a medical center today where there was a huge lineup of people, of residents in the area, who were trying to register to get their iodine pill in case of a radiation leak at that plant.
It's of course frightening to some extent.
Frightening.
Of course, to have to deal with this in 2022, it's unheard of.
And I met a doctor who was distributing the iodine. He said that the center gave out a few thousand pills in just 1 week. He says people are scared.
They will receive proper information on what to do, when to do.
He said there will be sirens, special sirens that go off in case of an emergency, separately to the normal air raid sirens that go off, and then that people will be alerted by social media, that there'll be calls, that there will be broadcasts on television to tell people to get out and how to evacuate. So there's here in Zaporizhia, in the region, there is a whole plan in place on how to get people out, how to get people to take their iodine pills. And it is quite scary for people there.
We should all be united in demanding one thing, the withdrawal of Russia from Zaporizhia nuclear power plant.
We now know that UN inspectors are in Ukraine, and there really is a hope in this area that this issue can turn a corner.
We continue to believe that a controlled shutdown of the Zaporizhia nuclear reactors would be the safest and least risky option.
The US is now pushing for a demilitarized zone to be set up around the plant. We know that Russia hates that idea, but the US is also now pushing for the plant to be shut down. The plant provides Ukraine with 20% of its power, so this issue is not so clear-cut. But inspectors would like to keep some kind of presence at the plant. So hopefully, and certainly the sense among people I've spoken to here who are living under these horrific circumstances, they're hoping that at least that nuclear threat can go away, and at least they can have that not be such an issue in their lives.
Wow, and to paint that picture of kind of an entire region held hostage in so many ways, in terms of energy, in terms of freedom of movement, and of course, in terms of an impending, perhaps, disaster that everyone's hoping to avoid. Britt Clennett in Dnipro, Ukraine. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad.
And one last thing. Yesterday was supposed to be this triumphant moment for NASA, nearly 50 years since we put a human on the moon. Instead, Gio, what happened? Are you okay?
I'm so bummed. Are you bummed?
This was the vibe at Kennedy Space Center, where ABC's Gio Benitez watched a momentous test launch for the Artemis moon program get scrubbed at the last minute.
A roughly 47-minute delay due to weather.
Every hour there was another issue. It was just like bam, 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 bam.
It's a potential leak on the supply side for liquid hydrogen.
And so at some point I realized this isn't going to happen.
In the moments leading up to this launch, some issues were described as workable, but then there was a temperature issue in an engine and then a crack in a valve.
There was a crack. Listen, anytime you hear the word crack, that's not a good thing for a rocket. And the next thing you hear is that one of the engines is having a problem. Yeah, you kind of need that.
This is Artemis Launch Control with an update.
The countdown clock was frozen, and eventually the launch was scrubbed for the day.
The issue that came up was an engine bleed that couldn't be remedied. But the rocket is currently in a stable configuration.
Even with no crew on board, NASA said they just couldn't chance it. Also, remember, each of these engines cost $4 billion apiece. But remember, NASA is not the only one trying to get back to the moon in a hurry. The Artemis program is trying to set up its semi-permanent base of operations, a station circling the moon so that Mars missions can easily dock and blast off. A long delay could give encouragement to SpaceX or the Chinese. So what happens next?
So Friday is not off the table yet. Engineers are going to be looking at this very closely today. And when they look at this and really analyze it, that's when they're going to make a decision. Will they try this again on Friday, or is this something that needs a lot more time and they actually have to maybe swap out an engine or repair something that's more difficult to do than right there on the launch pad? That's what will delay this potentially weeks.
NASA insists it's fine with a delay. After all, Artemis was a hunter. Waiting is part of the game. Whether or not this capsule gets into space or not, here's something that will definitely get into space. Nichelle Nichols, she was famed for playing Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek. She broke barriers by becoming really the first black science fiction star. She was part of the first interracial kiss on television. She died earlier this summer. Well, over the weekend, it was announced her ashes will be launched into space later this year. She will be on board, wait for it, a Vulcan rocket. Start here tomorrow. Hit that follow button for a new episode every day. I'm Brad Milkey. See you tomorrow.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
Can I hug you?
Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
Bring them on.
If only there was a place in the morning to start my day. With a smile, somewhere to help me get in the know. A place as spectacular as, well, me.
Nice